Now that you have the start branch, hopefully you have nodes 6 plus 7-ish installed. I installed mine using NVM. It's totally up to you how to do that, but I find NVM to be very convenient. Next thing we're going to talk about is Yarn. So many of you are probably accustomed to seeing NPM lots of places. NPM doesn't stand for Node Package Manager, but that's what I think of it as. It's basically a way to install dependencies for JavaScript type projects. And they ship a client called NPM. And it's been really great for a long time. However, if you're doing deployments, it's really tough because NPM is non-deterministic as of NPM 3.4-ish. This is going to change with NPM 5. NPM 5 will become deterministic, and it's also going to do locking as well. But that is still not released. It's actually coming out with Node 8 today. So that's why we're not teaching it today. We're going to stick with Yarn. The fine people over at Facebook were frustrated with their deployments, so they came up with a NPM client called Yarn. And what Yarn does is it creates these lock files, which we were just looking at, that locks down all of your dependencies. What's really cool about that is it's deterministic. When I say the term deterministic, it means I can run it 10 billion times, and on the 10 billion first time, it's going to run the exact same way. And you do not have that guarantee with NPM 3, which is the one that the previous versions of Node shipped with. So what's frustrating about that is when you're doing deployments, you don't know what state your node modules directory is going to end up in, which is a problem, as you may imagine, right? Like you can do like 10,000 deploys and 50 of them failed for unknown reasons, and you can't reproduce why they failed. Like it's a serious problem, right? So they came up with this Yarn dependency manager. It's faster than NPM 3, and it's deterministic, and it also has a flat structure, which are all very positive things for deployments. So today we're going to be using Yarn. So if you don't already have it installed, I'll show you how to install it real quick. You do npm install -- global yarn, like that. I already have it, so I'm not going to run that, but that's how you would do it. And then at that point, you should be able to say yarn -v. Oh, I guess it's going to do the installations. I guess -v does not do version. In any case, let's stop that for a second. So I have Yarn already installed, and now I am inside the start branch, and I'm going to run Yarn. What this is going to do, this is like the npm install. It's going to go through and install all of my dependencies based on what I have in package.json and the yarn lock file. So I'm going to say yarn, and then it's just going to do this magic, and it's going to install all of my dependencies for me. Now, to be fair, you could totally run npm install and not use Yarn, and I'm 99% sure it's going to work. But it's non-deterministic, so you can't truly be sure. No, I'm just kidding. You can be pretty sure. But so now, if we look in our node modules, mine was pretty fast. Mine only took 13 seconds because most of that was already cached for me. If you're doing this cold for the first time and are not on Gigabit, it might take a little bit longer. So if I go into node modules and look, I have a shit ton of dependencies installed now. So this is something that people that like to complain about Node like to complain about, is that there are just a crazy amount of dependencies. Not going to deny that. There's a crazy amount of dependencies. However, you have to keep in mind that Yarn installs all these node modules totally flat. So everything that gets included, that includes something else, that includes something else, it's all installed flat, which is not how npm installs them. Yarn actually goes through and symlinks them all into the respective node modules directories, which is pretty cool. Cool. So now that we've done Yarn installs, we're going to go ahead and skip the global installs for now. But just so you know, you can also do global Yarn installs. You can do Yarn global add blank So like if I was going to do like node daemon or something like that, that's how you would do that, and that would be a global install for Yarn. And if you want to add new dependencies to a repo, you say yarn add, and then react, right? Something like that. Instead of yarn install, right, it's yarn add. And then by the same token, yarn remove. The nice thing about yarn is it saves by default. You don't have to do npm install -- save, right? Also the true of npm 5. They're dropping the -- save. It's going to just save by default, which is going to be great. And if you wanted to save it to dev, you're going to say yarn dev, ESLint or something like that, right? And that is the full tour. That is how you use Yarn. Question from online?
Greg's asking if Yarn add updates the package JSON.
It does. Yeah, it'll update the package.json and it'll update the lock file for you automatically. Same thing with npm 5. It's going to ship with a new file called package-lock.json. And when you install, it'll also update that as well. So npm 3 has something called shrink wrap, which will be, I think, slowly be phased out in favor of package lock. And if you don't know what it is, that's OK. Like, let's just go forward with Yarn and package lock.
And are these npm updates supposed to just kind of displace Yarn? Like, is that what they're trying to do?
It's a good question.
They said they were just working on it actually beforehand, and then Yarn kind of like came out.
Yeah.
And then it looked like they're kind of backpedaling and filling in gaps, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
It's kind of a weird situation. Not to plug myself too much here, but the last episode of the podcast that we launched actually had Laurie Voss from NPM on, and he talks a lot about that whole situation. So there's good history there if you want to talk. They're super chill with each other is the sum of the story, right? They're both going to coexist and push each other forward, I think, is the sum of the story for now.
NPM 5 is definitely a big step up.
For sure. NPM 5 is going to be awesome.